And I'm so pleased to introduce our speaker today, Ruby Biscuit. Ruby has worked in the international education industry for over 12 years and in a range of roles, and is currently the International Strategy Manager at Ability English. I'm very excited to hear what Ruby has to say today. So without further ado, over to you, Ruby. And I might just hand you the controls.
Ah, great. Hand me the controls. Leaders leading leaders.
That's right.
Hi, everyone. I'm assuming that you can hear me. And it's great to have you all here and to be spending this afternoon with you talking about leadership and talking about how to lead leaders. I'm just going to start by checking that everyone can hear me. If you can't hear me, please type to Aparna. Will that work, Aparna?
Yes, I'm just typing in a question to say audio okay, and we'll see what responses come.
Okay.
Yes, loud and clear. Sounding good,
Great.
Ruby?
All right.
Yep.
Right. All right. Well, here we go. As Aparna said, at the moment I'm in the sales and marketing team at Ability English. However, I was academic manager in the past, and from my understanding, most of you are academic managers. And in this session, I'm going to be referring a lot to my time managing the academic team because it'll probably have more relevance in scenarios to you. However, this methodology that I've been using in leadership and I find works for me, I've applied to lots of different teams and departments. And in some ways that was a great experiment for me to do because I wanted to know if it wasn't just the magic of the fantastic world of ELICOS and ESL teachers that made it work, but it actually does apply to other stakeholder groups. So that's been good. So essentially this is a philosophy that I came upon early in my management career that I found interesting and wanted to apply. And most of the original ideas were from reading the work of Margaret Wheatley, who wrote the new book, Leadership of the New Science, which is the one I particularly found I wanted to apply. I'll refer more about that during the webinar, but just to give you that little indication of what we're going to talk about today. Aparna, I've just tried to press the slide. I'll just do one moment.
Yep.
Yeah, I've just tried to press the slide to go down and it hasn't worked for me.
How's it looking now?
Still your introduction slide. Am I able to tell you to click?
Yes.
All right, there's going to be a few times, but if everyone can get used to me saying click in the middle, then we'll be all right. So, Aparna, click.
Yes. So it says common challenges in academic management.
Great, thank you. So I thought I'd start with some of the common challenges I experienced in academic management. And each time click now, Aparna. So one of the things that I think we all experience as academic managers is high volume of stakeholder needs. In this role, you get so many people knocking on your door, students with petitions, etc. I'm sure you've all experienced 1,000,001 people wanting different things off you. So it can create a real sense of time restraint and intensity. Aparna, click. Another one is business objectives versus academic objectives. That foot you have to have in each camp of your academic pedagogical outcomes that you're working towards, and also what the organisation needs to remain sustainable and continuing. Aparna, click.
Yep.
The conflict between different departments when you've got one foot in each of those camps. Example between the marketing and academic departments. Click.
Yep.
Getting staff buy-in for operational change. I found that when I was managing the academic team, you know, they're so passionate about their world in the classroom, but to get them to value and understand the importance of engaging in maybe compliance activities or things that have to be done outside of the teaching world and getting your staff to engage with that and to do it with attentiveness. Click.
Yep.
Also, I found challenges with getting staff and stakeholders to do what I needed, the way I needed it done. They would go off on I think managing teaching teams, it's quite a creative team of people, and often they would go off on a tangent of what they thought should be done. And I found that some of the skills we'll talk about today helped me handle that as well. Click. And creating a consistent college culture can be challenging as well, especially when you've got a team of creative people that have very clear ideas about the way things should be done sometimes. I personally think that's an incredibly important part of management and of having a successful organisation. I do think that culture becomes the backbone of everything you do. And click.
Yep.
Then sort of going around full circle, finding time to invest in your teams is very easy to go, look, I'm going 100 miles an hour, especially with how some of our industry is right now. A lot of us, I'm assuming, are pretty busy. But again, I found making that time and prioritising that time was essential for me to actually reduce my workload for a start, and also to empower the whole team. So essentially the concept with which I'm talking is how to encourage your teams and how to facilitate your teams becoming a team of leaders within your department so that they can be self-regulating. So click. And that is more of a facilitation role that you're wanting to engage with rather than captain of the ship. However, you are still captain. So click, Aparna. So there's 5 steps in this approach. First one is choose connection. Now for me, this has been an absolute mantra in my job, because when you are getting so many stakeholders and so many challenges and decisions in one day, it's very difficult. And this is a very simple 2-word sentence. I could train my brain when I felt myself rejecting or reacting to an intense situation I might have been in. If I just said to myself, choose connection, I would remember that the way to get a primary outcome in any situation is to connect with the person that you're working with, regardless of what's happening. And by that, I don't mean giving them everything they want. I mean, saying yes. I mean, staying engaged with the challenging scenario that you're in. I do think this is key to getting the outcomes that you want. And so that's a handy tip that I've found has helped me a lot. Even when you're saying no, it's important to say no with connection and expressing an authentic regret that you can't help them or you can't do what they're requesting, and explaining why. But to get that rapport and to build that trust with your teams, choosing connection for me is non-negotiable. Although we do sometimes lose it, and you forgive yourself, apologise, connect with them in the apology, and then move on. Click upon it.
Yep.
The other key thing that is a pillar in this management idea framework is developing what is already there. Now, what that means is it means looking for what's already in your team and working with that. And Aparna, click. The third step that we're going to talk about is how to empower your staff towards ownership. So how do we get them to that point where they're starting to drive the boat? Aparna 4, now click. So you want to consciously build your culture together, and we'll talk more about that with some tools of that as we go. And Aparna 5, guide your teams to self-regulate. That's where you ultimately want to get. Your rocket takes off and they just are self-sustaining and doing what you want them to do. And then it's very exciting, I must admit. So Aparna, click. We're going to go through the first one a little bit, choose connection. I've given you a little bit of an intro on that one, so I'll get you to click again, Aparna. I'm assuming that you are on question your beliefs and behaviours?
Yes.
Okay. For me, this is essential. It starts with us. We can have really challenging, convincing scenarios that we're watching and we are experiencing where other people are doing certain behaviours that are not in line with what you need. However, the only way we can deal with any of these situations is to really know what we're afraid of, what we're prepared to do, what our beliefs are, what our behaviours are. And then our team will reflect that, and our outcomes will reflect that. Click. It's so important to know your fears and how you behave when you're afraid. What sort of person pushes your buttons and why, and how do you manage it? That's something that we all learn as we go, but I can't express enough. I think there is such an importance of self-reflecting, particularly when you feel yourself reacting. Question why and what happened so you can understand what it is. I'm of the belief that we all have emotions, all genders have emotions, and we're all using emotions all the time. If you're guarded or nonchalant or disconnected, usually the emotion is fear, not an emotionless state. The key for me is to master your emotions and to use them with a conscious intention. But if you're denying or you're disconnecting from a state you're having, you will probably avoid a problem, or you will exacerbate a problem. So that's key. Click upon it. Another tool that I find so important to the choosing connection is active listening. Now, some of you, I assume some of you know what active listening is, and if it's the first time you've come across this idea, I encourage you to Google it. I'm not going to cover this much because of the short time we've got, but essentially it's putting all of your thoughts, beliefs, things you want to get, things you want to say out of your mind and just trying to listen as an absolute vacuum to the other person. I've found that practicing that, you get very different outcomes when you're actively listening as opposed to when you are waiting for your turn and not really listening. Click. Another key one is empathy. I find that, and why, and this is, I'm going over these details because choosing connection really is so vital to the whole thing working. So yeah, it's about being able to really connect to the other person and what they're needing. Click. And a good way to do that is to, when you're talking to someone, actually question what are they feeling, what are they needing, and once you've got those two things, you're able to usually find a win-win that's going to work for everybody. Click. And another really important one that has been a mantra for me is when in conflict, get closer. And so what that's about is, again, choosing connection. I'll actively, if I'm finding a colleague irritating or obtrusive or creating obstacles for something where we need to work together, and I'm angry, you know, I find that this mantra helps me go, okay, you're angry, you're really annoyed with this person, go and talk to them, go and have a coffee, go and face-to-face, you know, actively get closer, and I find that's really key for me. So if you now move to clicking. So the solutions to all leadership problems really, in my experience, hinge on the quality of your relationships, your communication and your courage. And this is what I'm covering there with that principle of choosing connection. So then moving out from there, click upon it. It's really key to stop and invest. And click. First of all, to invest in yourself. However you do that, that's in your hands, and we've covered that so far. Click again. It's really important to invest in your strategy and your priorities and planning. It's really important to know what you're trying to achieve and building a strategy and a plan on how to achieve that, I believe. Of course, there will be flexibilities, but I think when you're managing an academic team, it's really great to take time back and do that with your team and work out, well, where are we going and what are our plans and how are we going to get there, and then sticking with that or staying with that. It can empower a real connectivity in your team. Again, there's that time challenge, but I would say this is the best time spent if you can do that. Click. Invest in your team meetings. You might have really vibrant teacher meetings. I think they come and go. When I first came into academic management, I had been an ADOS, so I'd watched these meetings for a long time, and I'd watched and heard the teachers dragging themselves into the meeting and looking like they were death warmed up, or watching their watch, or dragging themselves in late and just not engaging. I'm being pretty extreme, but yeah, really, it wasn't in a live space, and yet it's one of the most important times that you can have with your team because you've got their undivided attention. So I think that you've got to put in tricks in place to keep those meetings alive and vibrant, and I will talk more about that, some ideas around that. Actually, no, I'm going to talk about it now. So with the first meeting I went to with my team where I was the academic manager, I knew this was the climate. And so I decided to move all the tables out and put all the chairs in a really close circle, which put them off straight away. And, it's disarming, so it's going to be a habit. And they all came and sat down, like, well, what's she going to do? And then I started by talking about the elephant in the room of these meetings. And we got, describing the elephant in the room, which was about what we're bringing to these meetings and what we're creating together and who do you want to be here, and really raising the question for them to own their own meeting and why they're doing what they're doing. And we had a really good discussion about it. And then from that point, we chose to make our meetings different so that we weren't all wasting our lives, basically. So that worked. And then after a while, again, you get into a rut with a system or a pattern. And another technique we use that we're still doing at Ability and works really well is where we set up a little PD session. I'm sure you all have these tricks, but set up a little PD session where one teacher would have to give something that works in the classroom really well for them. They'd have to present it to the others for 5 minutes. So they all really loved and respected each other's craft in the classroom. But then once they'd finished that, they had to choose another teacher to do it. So I was completely removed, or the manager was completely removed from that process. So when the teachers gave, they were giving to their colleagues, and when they chose someone else, then that teacher felt the same level of generosity and reciprocity when they were giving the week after. And that just really created a lively environment that people look forward to that, and it was contributory. So they're just some ideas about meetings, but for me, meetings are really important. There's no excuse for dead meetings. You've got to apply yourself to think about how to engage people, and that might require direct confrontation to people that are sabotaging your group contribution. And click. Another one is one-on-one communication with your team. Now, again, if you've got big teams of teachers, that may seem completely overwhelming for time. Something I did, and I put it here because it was really valuable in building rapport, getting to know my teachers, getting to know their strengths, and also when you have that relationship, they're there when you need them and they do what you ask, essentially. So what I would do is I scheduled in an hour once a week, and I'd just rotate the teachers around in that hour, and I'd have a one-on-one form with them that they'd fill out, and then they'd bring it in, and they really valued the professionalism of that, and these are casual teachers as well, there are a lot of casuals on the team, but they really valued the PD of it. And I've included with Apana the sheet that I use for the one-on-ones, because it's a lot about how they're experiencing the college, how they're experiencing themselves, what their career goals are. So they feel heard and cared about, which they are, and also they're contributing to the overall college, and their voice matters. I found they've been incredibly useful to me in my job, and not so hard, just setting a calendar in an hour in the calendar where I'd see one a week, and you only need to do it once a year for each person. Okay, so I found that I did one each person for every 6 months. That was good, but I reckon you could get away with once a year, and they'd still value it, and you'd still get the same outcomes. So tick. Click, Okay, so develop what is already there. This is the second principle, and the one-on-ones help a lot with this. This is about, rather than trying to exercise your will on getting what other people, you want other people to do, this is about looking for what they love doing naturally. And click, Apana. This is really the crux of the concepts, one of the concepts from Margaret Wheatley, where, I've got a quote there saying, people don't do what you tell them to do. They only do what they feel engaged with. And I think you've probably all seen examples of that. And, I know for myself, I've had experiences where I have said to a team, okay, we're going to do this thing, and I'm up the front, and I'm really excited, and they're just staring at me. And then I go, I'll say it again in different words and up the enthusiasm and get them engaged like that. And they're still staring at me. And essentially, it's because, well, in Margaret Wheatley's theory and what I've played with and found to be true, if there's no actual interest for them as an individual, that it's not going to help them grow as a person, they won't engage. And she talks about self-actualization as a concept that is present in every biological structure on the earth and every human being, that unless you are choosing to do something in order to self-actualize, the human spirit is not that interested in doing it. And while we are able to follow the will of others, or without complete buy-in, what happens is our creativity gets dampened, or we siphon off things. Like we might make a deal where we go, okay, I'll go to work and do this thing that I don't really want to do, because I'll bargain it off, because after work, once I've got the money, I'll come alive and do what I really do want to do. Or these little silent decisions we make with which to ultimately make sure that we self-actualize. So if you're able to know that as a manager and look for ways to marry those two things together, where people are able to be at work and self-actualize, then it's just, you get an incredibly vibrant team that work together and really care about what they're doing. I'll give you an example, of something that happened at Ability a few years ago. We had an ADOS at the time called Charlotte Petitpré. I don't know if any of you know her. She's a wonderful woman, and you can see a little cartoon on this slide, and that's Mafalda. And Charlotte, in our office, it became a bit of a joke with everyone that came up organically from the teachers that Mafalda was like Charlotte. So they would put little jokes around the photocopier or on her desk with the little Mafalda cartoon, and it was a running intimacy within the community of the team. So she came to me one day and she was really struggling with getting the teachers to do something she needed them to do. And she'd asked them, she'd outlined why, she'd put up, she'd been really clear, she'd reminded them, she'd threatened them, gone through the usual list of things you do to try to get someone to do something. And they still weren't engaging. There was no self-actualizing for them in it. So we had a meeting and we talked about this concept of how do we get them to self-actualize, and we thought, okay, they're not at all self-actualizing with the task. Can we get a self-actualization from them in their interest in your need, that because that you have rapport with them, if they understand that this is affecting you and engage with that, will that help? So, and also we decided to try to make it fun and surprising so that we could engage them and get them to use a different sort of neurological response. So she made a little slide, and she came up with this idea of using the Mafalda cartoon. She made a slide for them and told a story about how Mafalda couldn't sleep and how Mafalda was experiencing lots of stress. It was very cute. And she presented it at the meeting, and the teachers just loved it. And really, they got it, and they were able to empathise with her. And by the next week, they'd all done what they were supposed to do, and it was over. So it does require some creative thinking around a problem and thinking about the other person and or the other people and what they value, and then looking at how you can structure or craft to meet those needs for them. So if we click, Aparna?
Yep.
So that it involves story. Have you got all the words up there, or keep clicking on that slide?
I've got all the words.
Story.
Yep.
You got them all? Okay. So it involved all of those things, and that was able to engage them. All right, so click again. The third pillar of this idea of getting your team towards individual leadership is empower staff towards ownership. So it's about how to get them, raising their passion, I suppose, and getting them to feel engaged and ownership. Again, part of Margaret Wheatley's argument is that that's a part of the human spirit as well. And she actually says something that I found really insightful, where she said, if you look over the last 100 years and how much people have been treated in the work, like whole workplaces have been structured around a kind of a mechanicizing or a mechanical way of approaching people's work and the way people work, and even an assembly line kind of approach. And it's really uncomfortable and usually leaves people feeling pretty dull and not liking work and saying that, you know, and there's lots of surveys where people say hate work, but they keep coming back. We keep coming back. And of course there's an exchange for money, but it's not just that. There is a sense of purpose that people want to feel like they're living a purposeful life in whatever they're doing. And this concept is part of how to build that into your team. So if we click and then click on the first dot. Have you got the first one? Believe in people, support their success.
Yes.
Partner? Okay, great. So yeah, that speaks for itself really. It's about really letting your team know that you believe in their potential to go further and you're supporting their success. You're creating frameworks for which they can stretch their professional muscles and you're supporting their success. And all these pieces fit in together. So then if you're going to ask them for something, maybe you've been in the one-on-one with them and you've asked them what their goals are, and then you've understood them and you've listened, and then you've got a task coming up that needs to be done, but you can match those goals with that task. So you go and talk to them about it, and you watch their eyes light up. And without that kind of process, they may interpret it that you're just getting them to do more work outside their hours or something like that. You have to have a fair exchange with that. Fortunately for me in Ability, I've been able to make sure people get paid for the work they do and things like that. And not all colleges have that kind of ownership, and I'm aware of that. However, if you can also put a good case to owners that, you know, part of my experimentation with this was I wanted to see teachers empowered, respected, their professionalism raised, and we made more money in a nutshell. And what I found with this is it does make more money because it creates more productivity. So these are things to consider when you're talking with your owners as well about these things. It's got to be a full body picture so that people don't just interpret it as more work that they don't want to do. Click. Offer projects that hold meaning. As I said before, find out what they're into and then find a project they're going to get their teeth into. Click. Of course, when you're doing this, you've got to put clear boundaries and intended outcomes there at the outset. And that's to counterbalance what we were discussing earlier about people going off on creative tangents. You've got to spend some time with them, making sure they really understand the boundaries of the project and the outcomes needed. And sometimes for teachers, they don't understand the bigger picture that it involves compliance or business or things that you see. So you have to give them part of that framework. But I've also found that if you frame that in a professional development context, they really enjoy learning that as well and understanding it. Then click. You've also got to keep them on training wheels as it's first starting. Like the first part of the project, you want to check in and check what they've done to make sure they are tracking on that and they did understand what the intended outcomes are and the boundaries, and keep bringing it back to that for them. Give them a framework which they need to work through. Then click. Then you've got to let them go and check in. Click again. Check in every now and then, but then really let their creativity go, and as long as they're staying in the boundaries and know what they are, you can step away. Click again. You monitor the outcomes, but it really, I found when I'm doing that sort of thing with projects, it's, it might be half an hour conversation with them once a month even, or once every 2 weeks, really very little on my time. And then the last one is feedback all the way as you go. Give really clear feedback and review as you go too. And often too, as they're embedded in the project, it can take whole different directions that are really good ideas that maybe you didn't think in the beginning. So yeah, I find that's really, really helpful. So if we click again, Aparna, I'm just going to recap again the concepts as we're going. So we've covered choose connection. That's where it's really important to always start with an authentic connection with yourself and with the person or the people that you're dealing with, even in conflict. 2, develop what is already there. Get to know your teams. Create structures where you are getting to know with them and engage them on a one-on-one basis. Find out what their interests are, and then find places for them to stretch their wings professionally. Again, empower staff towards ownership. So you give them the project, you hold their hand for a little bit, then you let them go. 4, we're going to move now into consciously building your culture together, which I think is another really important key. So coming out from the personal into the global. And 5, we're going to finish up with guide your teams to self-regulate. So in number 4, click. Have you got the tree, Aparna?
Yes.
Great. So consciously build your culture together. This, often in organisations, you may experience getting handed down a mission or a set of values, or you're in an organisation that just rolls along, no one's really thought about it, but you're great and you do this thing and you all kind of know what it is, and it's just happening organically. But which I guess describes a bit how Ability was when I came in. But there's real value to going through a process to make that explicit and articulate it. And I'm going to describe to you as we go something we did at Ability that you might find useful. So click, Aparna. So you want to develop an organisational identity together, or that's what we tried to do at Ability, so that everybody knows who they are as a culture. And that's about also knowing why your students choose you. Why do your students choose your college? What is it that they come looking for, and what is it that you're doing? And click, Aparna. And then you need to articulate that identity. So you've got to find a language for it, and it's going to be your organisational language. One of the things we did, and again, this is a handout that you can have after this, was, and we've made this up essentially. We looked around online a bit, but often your organisation will tell you which way to go once you know yourself. So we decided to put a question out to the whole organisation, in sales, in finance, in marketing, in student services, in admissions, and the teachers, of course. And the question was, if Ability was a person, like if they're at a party, if Ability walks into a party, what do they like? And so we got all of these groups together in a group to paint a picture of what they like. So first of all, everyone thought they were quite funny and fun to stop working and just go, all right, so they start to play. And, it's like, is Ability a woman or a man? And what's she wearing? Ability's a woman, by the way. What's she wearing? And what's she like? Is she really social? Is she talking to everyone? Is she looking at the bookshelf because she's really interested in, seeing ideas, or, so you kind of paint this picture of what this person's like, and everybody really enjoyed that activity. Then we went, and we did these in the fortnightly meetings, so we did one. Then once we had all the teams, we shared them with each other. So the next fortnight meeting, everyone got to see what everyone else thought, and they loved that because they could see what was in common, and what was different. And they were seeing each other's creativity. And that was across states as well. So we had the Melbourne team and the Sydney team's perspectives, and that was fun. And then from there, the next meeting we did this over like a month. The next meeting we had, we had to narrow down those. We left this just with the teaching teams, the Sydney and Melbourne teaching team, because really your teachers are your face and your backbone in lots of ways. So we got them to siphon down that identity into some values. And once we had those, we had a language we could articulate. And everybody got a real sense of pride through doing that, of what they'd created. And we all decided together what we wanted our college to embody, what we wanted it to offer students, and what we wanted to bring into activities. It also gives you a brilliant framework to talk to when you've got staff deviating, because they know that's the deal. They know that that's what the college is about. And if they're not about that, or they don't want to be about that, then it's not a match. And you can have a robust conversation around that. But it's not an option to sabotage that collective pursuit. And one of the things I did off that as well was I had a recruitment, I used the values in recruitment. So I had a checklist of areas that teachers had to have to be employed at Ability. And if they didn't have those qualities, then they weren't right for the culture. So it was in addition to, do they have the teaching skills, etc. And I would also, through that, which I found worked really well too, is within your team you'll have little subsets. Like you'll have your ESP teachers that have a different sort of interest or personality. Then you've got your beginner teachers that just love being down that beginner and elementary end, and they're always rather special because they're hard to find. But you'll have your different teachers that do different specialties. And as I was employing, I would think, this person will like that person. They're going to get on well together. They're going to create well together. They're going to have a good partnership. And that was really interesting and fun to do too, because it would work. And then you would get these very exciting projects coming out of groups that that had things in common or different interests, similar interests. So I'll get you to click again. I've gone off on a tangent a bit, but so you involve all stakeholders, and click again, Aparna. You ensure that the identity guides all action, and again, you recruit to that identity. And the last one, very important, you proactively confront deviation. This pulls back again into choose connection. As a leader and as a manager, one thing I have seen as vital in myself and the leaders around me is we do not have the option, if we stand in that seat, if we sit in that seat, we do not have the option to avoid necessary confrontation with people when they are actively undermining what the organisation needs to be healthy and sustainable and robust. Now, that can happen for a range of reasons. It could be because they don't understand that, in which case it's our responsibility to sit down and explain and talk to them about it. Maybe it doesn't matter that they understand it. They're in a place in their life where they maybe know they're in the wrong place, but they're too scared to jump. And I believe you've got to have that conversation with them, not to tell them what to do in their life, but by sitting down and talking to them about the problems that are happening, they have to confront that, and you have to facilitate them confronting that. So it's not about, Aparna actually asked a really great question last time I did this presentation, where she said, isn't that a bit like creating a cult, like a group think? And I thought it was a really good question. I've thought about that a lot over the years. I don't think it is. I think it's about saying, this is who we are, this is what we're trying to create. If this matches who you are, then that's great, let's go. If it doesn't, or if you've made a deal with yourself that you're going to only half be alive when you're at work and go home to be alive, or some sort of silent deal like that, this is not the place to do that. You need to be fully present here and engaged. And yeah, and I have, it's a line I won't accept to be under from myself or from my staff, and I think that's really key. So if we go tick. Another thing that came out of the Margaret Wheatley work was looking at the spectrum of chaos and order in organisations. And this I found fascinating because pretty much the theory is that we're on this spectrum, all our organisations are on this spectrum somewhere between chaos and order. So you can see the dotted line down the middle. I want you now just to think about your organisation and think about where you think you are. You can even draw it on a piece of paper and put a line down where you think you are, or, you know, draw it on your screen. But, and then, Aparna, can you click for me? So I'm assuming there's a green line that's appeared.
Yes.
And that's where, yeah, that's where I try to keep ability. And that's because of what I want to create here and what Margaret Wheatley also sort of implied was well, I've tried to create an environment where you get maximum creativity and you accept the mess that comes with it. And that's about that point in the line. Now, it depends on, again, what your overall offering to students is and what your students' expectations are, and also what your organisation is trying to achieve. If I was in a university language centre, I would be probably more towards the order than where we are there because of what the students were looking for. So you can only know that from where your organisation is or where you want to be. So click upon it. So the next slide is just outlining that a little bit more, that you know, often we're told that chaos is a bad concept, but really it's within the spectrum of chaos where the most heightened creativity and self-actualization happens, because organisms bump into each other every now and then, but there is creativity that comes out of chaos. So if you've got a really highly ordered environment, you want more empowerment. You've got to move towards allowing a little bit of chaos to come in. If you've got a really chaotic environment that's just loose, it's all over the place, you need to get more alignment and bring in structures that are going to order your group more. And I found that a good little gauge, and a really quick one to look around going, oh my God, everything's in complete chaos. I've got to put in a structure that's going to bring a bit more order. So you can see here now where you're almost becoming like a conductor. You're not that, like for me, I'm not that actively engaged in what my staff are doing. For example, currently I have a team of staff in different states and overseas, and I really talk to them once a week. Doesn't matter if they're in the same building as me, and they all know what they're doing and they're off doing it and they're passionate. And I've got it to that point where I'm almost like, oh my God, what do I do? I do things. But yeah, it really is amazing to watch this work. So Aparna, if you could click again. So the last step is guide your teams to self-regulate. That's where you want to get it to, where, and I really enjoyed this about the experiment too, because as I came out of managing the academic department, I thought, is this all about me? Is this going to collapse behind, you know? But that's not what's happened. We've had 4 different managers now since I was managing that, and it has maintained the awareness, and the teachers actually self-regulate it. The new teachers come in and they're brought into the value system, and when it's not even explicit anymore, it's so embedded. So to get it to that point, click Aparna. You've got to give recognition when the team aligns. You've got to, I think after we did that initial meeting of working out who we were, probably for about a year, I referred to it all the time in our meetings and everything we did and things like that. Click again, Aparna. I actively confronted deviation, and the rest of the team saw that. And to be clear too, before I did all this, I listened to them and created a work environment with conditions that they wanted. So they were in a job they liked, and that, you know, that they were valuing what the company had offered them. And so then this came on, it was like an exchange, you know. Click again, Aparna. Within your teams going off and doing their thing, you do get triggered at times. And I found the powerful thing for me to do, because if you are in a leadership position, I would be confident in assuming that you're a good decision maker, you're not afraid of standing up and initiating things for the group to follow, and all of that is key. However, this requires some flexibility in that as well, where you're recognising the leadership qualities in everybody. And so one of the other mantras that I find really helps me in my head, because we're all natural critics, is curiosity over criticism. When I see myself getting critical about something, like perhaps I've put someone on a project and they're doing things and I'm like, oh God, you're doing it. No, don't look like that. You know, my internal voices. If I can remember to have curiosity, then I can go over and go, hey, why are you doing it like that? What was behind that decision? And then they'll outline it for me. And more often than not, there is an absolutely brilliant idea they've had. And maybe the way they're doing it needs to be guided by that bigger perspective that you have as the manager. But essentially, real gold can come out of that. And that if you don't ask those questions and have curiosity, authentic curiosity, you may miss it. And then the empowerment that happens through that is fantastic, and that other person starts, you know, feels really great about what they're initiating. Click, Aparna. So there's zero tolerance for blame culture within that. And click again. Zero tolerance for us and them culture. And that feeds back into what I was saying about, you know, you've got to be courageous, and you've got to be able to confront situations that are not empowering situations, that are situations where people are actively choosing not to be empowered or offer empowerment to the group. And I found when I do that, they'll either go or they'll get on board, and that's the outcomes you want. And I know also in some organisational structures, you have to be really careful about your industrial regulations with that. I'm not suggesting, you know, clearing everybody out and creating instability in that way. But do go through that process. Those processes are there to support both parties. And if you need to go through it, because it's better to have that person where they do fit in their life and they're alive and passionate. And if it's not within your organisation, you're not serving them and you're not serving your group. And your team will really appreciate you taking that courage to do that. Okay, so click, Aparna. So this is pretty much getting to the end of what I wanted to outline. If we look here, it's choose connection as your first step, and click develop what is already there in your team. Recognise what they're good at and help them to self-actualize. Click empower your staff towards ownership. Click consciously build your culture together, know who you are, and make sure everybody's expressing that in their own way. And click guide your teams to self-regulate. Create a structure where they are embodying the greater picture. When you're an academic manager, I mean, when I was academic manager, I had about 50 or 60 teachers under me. It's so unusual, a management job, having that many direct reports. And then you've got the volume of students that want to talk to you. And then you've got the other departments. It's an incredibly high number of stakeholders. That it was almost like, not only did it work for everybody, but it gave me more time. It enabled me to hand over to the whole group. If I had tried to run around and manage all of that without getting the whole team, managing ourselves as a group, I would have a lot more grey hair, let's put it that way. So essentially, that's what I wanted to cover. I've put in also some handouts around difficult conversations. It's just stuff I've Googled and found interesting frameworks to follow and useful. I think they're the main handouts that I've put in with this, and an interview with Margaret Wheatley. So if you're curious to know more about the ways, some of her ideas and want to pursue her work a bit more. So yeah, we've got a little bit of time left. So I just wanted to know if there's any questions that might be useful about specific situations you've got. If you put them through to a partner, I can try to help.
So Ruby, just while we're waiting for some questions, I had one for you.
Right.
With the order and chaos, were there any trends that are common for people to select? Like you mentioned, universities might need more order, whereas you keep it where it is because you like the creativity that comes from the chaos. Have you observed any other trends in that sort of spectrum?
One thing I've noticed in my current role, which has been a really great sort of expansion of the whole thing, is I have to work closely with teams that are very much in the creative area, and then teams like the finance department or the admissions department that are very much in the order area. And I think there's a key to being creative in an ordered state as well, because sometimes the order end of things can get very contracted, and individuals can become contracted, and that's when you start to see pedantry and almost a refusal to look at the bigger picture or the humanity in a situation and just stick with a policy religiously. And that's, I've found what's helped me with that is applying to the managers there those principles of choosing connection and building empathy and trying to hear their needs and meet their needs. So I suppose I'm just referring to that idea of sometimes even in your own team you might have a team of general English teachers who are really working with the language travel market or something like that, and then some really seriously focused EAP students or something like that. If you can find that people in your teams that are more leaning naturally towards order and the ones that are more leaning towards chaos, and give them those spaces to be in, you usually get the best creativity out of order and the best creativity out of chaos. I don't know if that answers your question, Aparna, but...
Yes, in a roundabout manner. Yes, it does. I do have another question for you, Ruby. We have a question here, and what kind of recognition do you give? And I worry that saying nice work isn't enough with my team. Is there anything else that you suggest? And I think this is a great question because often managers hesitate to praise their staff, and this is something I've heard come up many times.
Okay. Yeah, look, I do praise with in a whole lot of ways. often, I mean, I'm someone who has a kind of a sense of humour with what I do. So I will often praise them in a way that is fun and playful. So, you know, that will just be moving through the room if I see something. So they're used to me as somebody that does that. And while it's sort of not that laden, sort of intense thing, they enjoy the you know, that engagement and receive from it. But then there's that space where it's about what someone's achieving independently, and the one-on-ones really help with that, because you really get to know what they want and who they are. And then you're able to set up a situation like how I would reward would be PD in the area that they want it, or a challenge in the area that they want it. And then they achieve their own personal goal. And then you say, you were brilliant there. And then you see them go, yeah, I was. I didn't think I could do it. You just set up a space where, or you set up a challenge for them to practice or to flex their muscles against. And then you watch them achieve what they wanted. And then you're able to look at each other's eyes and share the knowledge that, hey, you did it. I saw you scared to do it. You know, you did it. I mean, I remember even one of my best FCE teachers wanted to stay in general English. And I challenged her. I said, you're too good to stay in general. You've got to spread your wings. You've got to make yourself more employable. And this is one thing I say to my staff a lot in every level. I say, you're not going to be here forever. Use this time to get every skill that you can wherever you want to go, and invest in them that way, and then look for challenges. And she was so scared of going into FCE, but she did it, and she was brilliant at it. And then I was able to go back and tease her and go, I can't teach FCE, eh? You know, and so there's little ways to do it that are different to, it's about creating intimacy with that person's desires, I suppose. And I also do at the teachers' meeting, if someone's achieved something fantastic, I do share it with the group. Sometimes they hate that, but I just think, no, we need to recognise and honour each other. And then the teachers put it on, you know, really recognise them as well.
Yep.
So in the time that I've been managing, I've set up where I've got teachers who've never presented before to present at conferences, to design curriculum and to learn how to do that. I've facilitated teachers expanding their qualifications in lots of different ways, all sorts of different challenges, going up into management, anything that I can find that advances them as an individual in the way that they want to be advanced, and just facilitating that. I find it the best way.
Thanks, Ruby. That's a great example. We have another question about culture and identity building.
Yeah.
So also to do with confronting deviation. Now, has this ever had a negative impact on the team or resulted in mistrust? And there's an example here. If a colleague who was their friend was let go, for example, just because they didn't fit into the ability mold, let's call it, how would that affect the team, for example, and their morale?
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing I found with it, it's like the silent, it's another elephant in the room. It's this, they all know. Like, even if they like this person, this might have been my experience, and I've seen it repeat several times. They like the person, they're in their team, they're their friend. However, they know where they're draining the energy of the group, because we own our individual, but we own the group as well. And usually they'll express, you know, you feel the team lighten. They don't need to say it, but I have experienced actually teachers coming and saying, yeah, it's easier. It's better, but it's easier without them here. I love them, but it is easier, and I think they're happier now, and, you know, things like that.
Yep.
I guess it depends on the dynamics of your group. I haven't had that experience where they've backlashed me because they think that person's great. Generally, it's draining them as well. They may not talk about it, but it would be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ruby. We have lots of questions coming in now. One of the questions is about leading teams when numbers of clients, as in students, are falling, and the the team is actually shrinking.
Yeah.
So how would you lead a team when they're in a negative space like that?
Yeah, that's really hard. I always have very upfront conversations with them. Again, it's that thing of choosing connection. You know, and creating time for it. Again, this is where the meetings are so valuable to me, and also individuals. I would talk to them about what's happening, how we're contracting, why that's happening, how long we expect it to happen, what management's doing to try and turn that around, if we, something like, at times I've been really explicit with them with a framework. I'm just thinking about 2009, when we all went through this one. A framework of how we decide who is the most prioritised teacher. I made that really transparent, and it was a system that we all, I educated them on, which was we didn't do a first in, first out. It was about what you're contributing into the college, and that's why I would say to them, the more skills you get, the more valuable you come to the organisation. So make sure you can teach general English, you can teach AP. If you're versatile, then we want you. The other thing I would do a lot was make a flexible work environment for the teachers where, we knew our seasons, and we'd say, okay, if you want to go on leave here and come back here, that's fine, I'll hold your job, and things like that. So they really enjoyed that as well, and a lot of them would, again, the group almost self-regulated it, where they'd go, okay, us 5 will take off during June, July and go to Europe or whatever, and then then it would come back and have it all transparent so that people knew what was going. Of course, there's times where it's not so rosy and it's not a win-win, and I found in those times to follow this philosophy is you really sit with that person and experience the suffering with them as well, in a way. I know we all want them out of our office as fast as we can because it feels awful. But there's a level where I find that taking that time, that extra time to sit with them and stay with them and hold that place, which is, devastating for a moment for them.
Yep.
It's that also holds value and volumes with your team as well,
Thanks for that, Ruby. We have 2 more questions and 4 minutes, and so I might shoot off the first one quickly. Teachers who have become comfortable in their set way of doing things, how would you encourage creativity among them?
This is where I confront it, I'll call them in on the one-on-one and I'll talk about it. I'll say, look, you've been where you are for a long time, and I often I'll say, look, I see there's more in you than this. You're very good at that, but you seem to be on automatic pilot. Do you agree? And we'll have a robust conversation about it, and then talk about how we can find a different, a new challenge for them, and usually they will go away and think about that and come back and decide, oh yeah, okay, I'll play a bit. And, I know that some organisations, they might be on good packages and they're just hanging in and they're half there. And I just don't tolerate that. If they're choosing that way, then I'll bring in a process of letting them really transparently know where they're underperforming, what their expectations are, come back in a month, let's see how you went, set them goals. If they're improving, good, everybody's happy. If they're not, go back to a warning system letter, let them know that they're underperforming.
Yep. Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah.
The last question for the afternoon: how do you manage the allocation of teaching hours to casual staff? For example, do you link this to abilities, culture, and expectations?
As in, you get more teaching hours if you're more in line with the overall thing?
I think the question is really, maybe, I think the way I understand the question is full-time teachers versus casual staff.
Look, we have gone to our teachers several times over the years to say, who wants to be permanent? Very few put their hand up to be permanent with us. Some do, but see, they get all the benefits of being permanent and they get the flexibility. So they kind of like it, and they get more, the more money in their hand. But of the ones that are permanent, the clear advantage we say to them is, okay, you get less money each week, but you get first use of the longer hours or the more hours during the week. So that suits some people, and the benefits of the leave, etc. But the majority of our teachers don't want that. And then I say to them, okay, if you want more hours and you want more engagement in the college, then you need to make yourself versatile and get a full range of skills on your bow, and then we'll find stuff for you. Like they'll say, oh, I'd like to, and they put their hand up for stuff. You say, we've got this coming up. We think you or you would any of you want it, that sort of thing. So again, it ties into that professional development and that constant encouraging them to develop their skills as widely as they can, and then it's a win-win exchange because they're way more useful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ruby, thank you so much. That was so great. And what I have taken away in 2013, when I first watched you do the session, was the curiosity of a criticism, and that really stuck with me. And I know that most of our audience today would have taken so much, despite the click upon that we went through a bit. So apologies for that. Don't know
No,
what happened there, but thank you so much, Ruby, and thank you everybody for coming from around Australia for this brilliant webinar. We'll have more leadership webinars coming up in 2016, and the next one is with Richard Arkell on the 8th of December. Hope you can join us for that. Ruby, thank you again, and goodbye.
thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.